Thanks, David. And thanks everyone for tuning in this morning to hear an update on Killi. If you aren't aware of us, we're a junior exploration company and we're focused on exploring for a new copper gold deposit in Queensland. The last 6 months, we've been building our targets at the Mt Rawdon West project. As the name would suggest, we're in an area close in proximity to the Mt Rawdon gold mine, which is the 2 million ounce gold system inland from Bundaberg. We've generated 2 really exciting looking gold copper porphyry epithermal targets to date, and I'll walk you through what they look like and what the company's exploration plans are for the next 6 months. So we can go to the next slide, David. Through the disclaimer, I'll let you read that at your own time, and through to our corporate structure. So currently our market cap's reasonably small, around 5 million. Our shares are around 5 cents. We've only got 120 million shares on issue, and our top 20 shareholders hold around 45% of the company. Goldfields has recently entered into the company as well in relation to the joint venture which David just mentioned over our West Tanami project, gold project up in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. We've got 4 assets in Australia with exploration currently and for the foreseeable future focused on the Mt Rawdon West and Ravenswood North projects in Queensland. So we go to our next slide, please. This is just a small synopsis on the West Tanami project. So just briefly, I'll mention the JV deal we did with Goldfields, which we signed 4 weeks ago. The company holds a large position, about 1,600 square kilometres of tenure at the western end of the Tanami fault belt. It's a long strike from about 20 million ounces of gold endowment sitting mainly on the Northern Territory side of the WA-NT border. Goldfields has entered into a 2-staged agreement with Killi to earn a maximum 85% interest in the project by spending $13 million. It's a good deal for Killi as we remain leveraged to a new gold discovery in the Tanami, which is a definite positive. Let's go to our next slide. We're going to move over to Queensland here, and our main focus is the Mt Rawdon West copper gold project. Now, it's located between Mount Morgans, Krakow, Gympie, which is some 20 million ounces of gold endowment, and they're porphyry epithermal copper gold systems. Also in the mix there is the Mt Rawdon 2 million ounce system, which is an intrusive related gold project. What we're looking for, if we move to the next slide, please, is we're looking for a whole new system. We're looking for a system of similar size and scale to that of the other systems in the region, such as Krakow and Mount Morgans. They're generally large tonnage, low grade, and they have a long mine life. We know we're in the right area because we already have these existing deposits nearby and this style is already present. We'll be building the targets by putting together layers of geochemistry, geophysics, and geology. Of note, I've just put down the bottom there, IP survey was an instrumental method in finding Cadia. So one of the most famous porphyry copper gold systems on the east coast of Australia is Cadia, and that was found by copper gold mineralisation found at surface. An IP survey was completed, and the IP survey generated an IP anomaly at depth. This was then drilled, and that drill hole became the discovery hole for the deposit. So we're going to follow that general principle of exploration, looking for these styles of systems. Go to the next slide. So this is our project. This is the Mt Rawdon West project. This slide here outlines about 300 square kilometre tenement package. The gold mineralisation corridor extends through the tenement from the southeast to the northwest, from the Mt Rawdon gold mine in the southeast. Perpendicular to that, there's a copper gold corridor that extends across the project from the Nichols Reward area by Sol, which is owned and operated by SolGold, through to the new Moonta area, which is a historical copper gold area for mining. Fieldwork to date has determined 2 copper gold molly soil anomalies referred to as Kaa and Baloo. which this also included at surface 7.2% copper and 12.4 grams per tonne gold in rock chip samples. I draw your attention also to the tenement there. The Mount Perry, the historical Mount Perry copper, gold, silver mine, as well as an old copper mine called the Woombar Hill Mine, and molybdenum mines are also located on the tenement. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is zooming in onto the two targets specifically in the centre of the tenement package. So Kaa is a 1.8 kilometre long by 400 metre wide geochemical anomaly. It aligns with the old Woombar copper mine, which is from around 1907, which is located at the top of the hill. Processing of the geophysics, historical geophysical surveys completed, identified a VTEM anomaly, which coincides with the geochemical anomaly. And importantly, there's not one single drill hole at that target whatsoever. So it's never been tested and remains open as a new copper gold discovery potential. Baloo is the second target, which is even larger. The geochemical footprint's even larger. It's 2.5 kilometres by 1.5 kilometres. It also has an aligned VTEM anomaly determined from geophysics. There are old workings present, and likewise, it also doesn't have any drilling to date at the target. So all indications so far is that we have a very fertile potential porphyry epithermal system, and that remains our exploration focus for the company. We go to the next slide. So these next two slides zoom in a little bit closer and go through more of the geological detail for Kaa and for Baloo, which I will let you go through at your own pace as we are limited by time. So if we go through to slide next one and the next one, this is more importantly the exploration plan we have for these two targets. So the plan is mapping and further geochemistry will be completed, which we've already started. We put that announcement out last week. In conjunction with that, we're going to start a induced polarisation survey, an IP survey. The IP survey will determine any sulfide-bearing units beneath the geochemical anomalies, and those results from the IP will then provide a drilling target for the company to test. The maiden drill campaign will follow on from those IP results. And in the bottom corner there on the left, that's just a small schematic across the Baloo anomaly. There's the copper gold anomaly sits on top of a rather large hill range, which is 1.5 odd k's wide. On the flanks of that is anomalous molly, as well as on the northern edge is the VTEM anomaly. The IP survey should extend down to around 300 odd metres depth and determine any sulfide-bearing bodies beneath that hill. Those results then will provide a drill target for the company in the coming months. We go to the next slide. Our Ravenswood North project is our second project in Queensland and our second focus. The next three slides cover this project, which I won't go through in too much detail, again, because of restraints in timing. But we're within the Charters Towers region. There's about 28 million ounces of gold endowment within 60 kilometres of the project. We have around 660 square kilometres of tenure, prospective for copper and gold, and we've determined two targets to date. Our first target was Rocky. So if we go to our next slide, Rocky is a 1.5 kilometre squared gold silver target. That was in geochemical soils. We'll determine that target to start with. The first 11 drill holes have been completed into that target and returned 10 metres at 0.66 grams per tonne gold, which are reasonably good first pass results for such a large system. The second target we have is the next slide along, is West Branch. This is in its infancy. To date, only surface rock chip sampling and soils have been completed. However, rock chips are pretty exciting looking numbers, with 5 and 6% copper, 8 to 9 grams per tonne gold, and up to 27 grams per tonne silver. That's a secondary target to Rocky, but is still within our exploration pipeline. Final slide on our projects is slide 19. This is our Balfour project. It's in the Pilbara. The company originally pegged this tenement for prospectivity for copper, and there's 2 existing copper soil anomalies which would relate and coincide with the VTEM anomaly at each. The company sold this project to Black Canyon, which is a manganese company, for them to explore for manganese for a total consideration of $500,000 worth of Black Canyon shares. Killi, importantly, as part of the sale agreement, Killi retains all copper rights to the project and the ability to explore when ready. And our final slide, our investment proposition is, in summary, we're actively out at the copper gold targets at our Mt Rawdon West project. I was even out there last week mapping. We have an IP survey planned to commence in the coming weeks, with our maiden drill campaign to follow from any IP targets generated from the results of the IP survey. So activity is very high. We're out and about doing what we can. We will have results and news flowing for the coming weeks and months.
Thanks, Kath. Great presentation. Shareholders love a CEO who loves getting out on the ground and kicking the rocks. And I know that's certainly something you enjoy doing. Couple of questions. One's come through in relation to the Goldfields transaction. Why was that so appealing, and how does it set Killi up going forward?
So Killi, when we floated in February 2022, our flagship project was the West Tanami. That's the project that got us really excited, and a lot of our shareholders came in at that point. It is a very exciting project, and the potential there to find a massive gold system is reasonably high. We found in our first 18 months of operating that costs for a junior associated with exploring in probably one of the last real frontiers in the country were reasonably high. And although we did some really fantastic work and moved all the targets along, it made sense for us to find a partner with that one asset. It's a big project and it needs a lot of involvement. So we decided that we might look for a partner, and we were conveniently approached by Goldfields, and they understood the potential of the project and what it needs. So we'll be working with them for the next 5-6 years to develop the asset.
And importantly, Killi's not letting go of the project, still retains significant hands-on interest, but also an ongoing equity interest.
Yes, absolutely. So the maximum 85% stake in the project, we retain 15%. There's also ability for us to participate in exploration and retain that 15% if we so wish. And there's also a royalty associated with it as well. So by no means are we sold out of that project. We still believe in it and very bullish on finding a new gold deposit. But we understand that for a junior explorer like ourselves, a partner is extremely useful.
And why is Goldfields the perfect partner for this project?
Well, they're able to supply funds. They also understand the region very well. They are a 15% holder in Hamlin Gold, which is our nearest neighbour. They own about 2,200 square kilometres of ground. We're second to them with about 1,600 square k's of tenure. So Goldfields already has knowledge of the region and what they're looking for. So it makes sense that they then had access to a large piece of land as well, which they can bring that knowledge with them.
One of the questions here, it's a good question. When you're listed, obviously, with assets in Queensland, assets in WA, you could argue, rightly or wrongly, that sometimes it's hard to focus on where should you be. Does this deal give you focus?
It does. It means that as the project was so large, it did take up a lot of our time and funds. And bringing in Goldfields means that they can focus on all the administrative and tenement management for that project. And we can continue in Queensland, where we've been having some really good success and things have been moving quite quickly over there for both projects. So it really does make things a lot easier for us to focus on exploration and copper and gold, which is what we'd like to focus on for the future.
And from a shareholder point of view, does it also assist with news flow? You know, shareholders, particularly with smaller cap companies, are focused on news flow. They're focused on results. They're focused on exploration and the outcomes of that. Does this enable the company to lift its exploration focus in Queensland and at the same time drive greater news flow?
Yeah, so at the time of float, the Mt Rawdon West project wasn't even granted yet. So we've been moving that along quite quickly in the background from landholder access, etc., to get on the ground. As per news flow, the West Tanami was somewhat limited with weather events that mean that for 3 to 4 months of the year, you're unable to access the ground. Not to mention there was flow-on effects from damage from such weather events. Last year, we had a few issues where the Halls Creek Fitzroy crossing bridge was washed away, which meant that it was quite difficult for us to gain access. So yes, news flow wise, access in Queensland is much easier for the company to gain. It's only a flight and a 45-minute drive from Bundaberg to get to the project, which is extremely positive and easy for us to get to.
Final question, funding. So do you have the funds required to drive the Queensland projects forward and fund the exploration that you plan to do?
Yes, we do. So as part of the joint venture arrangement with Goldfields subscribed to $500,000 worth of shares in Killi, supporting our Queensland assets, as well as we raised an additional $1 million, dominantly from our existing shareholders. So with $1.5 million will then go towards Mt Rawdon West, which will fund the IP survey, the mapping and surface geochem infilling, and our first maiden program drill campaign at Mt Rawdon. So we're funded for the next 6 months, which is really exciting.
Well, really exciting. A managing director or CEO who likes getting on the ground and kicking the rocks and driving value for shareholders at the ground level. A key partnership locked away and a clear focus on the Queensland assets. Exciting times ahead for Killi. Thanks for your time, Kath.
Thanks for having me, David.